Today I'm chatting with Santiago Pérez, one of the top RC aerobatic pilots in the world. As one of Extreme Flight's team pilots, Santi combines surgical precision with aggressive low-altitude 3D that pushes planes to their absolute limits. He's also a really accomplished pilot in IMAC. He's a regular in the top places at world-class competitions like the Tucson Aerobatic Shootout, and his demo flights are some of the most fun you can watch. But Santiago isn't just a competition and demo pilot. He's also deeply involved in aircraft development, working closely with Extreme Flight to design and test their latest airframes. From the new Extra 300 lineup to the massive 120-inch Extra 260 that he flies with the DA200, Santiago helps shape the planes that define modern aerobatics. In this conversation, we deep dive into his approach to both IMAC precision and freestyle. He shares his setup philosophy, breaks down the differences between Extreme Flight's models, and reveals the techniques behind some of his signature moves. We also explore his recent ventures into 3D jets and his unique perspective on balancing competition pressure with the pure joy of flying. Whether you are chasing podium finishes or just want to fly better, Santiago's insights will take your aerobatics to the next level. Hey Santi, how's it going?
Good, man. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey, I know you've been all over the place, pretty busy with events, and I think we are going to chat about some of those. But maybe before we get started on that, I'm pretty sure that most people listening or watching this have heard of you, seen you fly in person or in videos. But just in case for those that have not, maybe you can give a quick, brief intro about yourself.
Yeah, no, I've been flying for, probably about 15 or 16 years now. Started competing probably about 10 years ago. So kind of just been doing it ever since. Mostly IMAC and, some freestyle, but lately I've been tending to do a little bit more of, just 3D and freestyle and that sort of stuff.
Did the aerobatics come into the picture pretty early when you started with RC, or were you doing other sides of the hobby?
Fairly early on. I mean, I actually flew, which is like, your average like nitro airplanes for probably the first 2 or 3 years that I started flying. So, I started doing it with my dad just because he flew, and he never really did any aerobatics or anything like that, but was always kind of drawn to it. So, started the first plane I ever hovered was actually, like a profile nitro airplane. So it didn't quite start off with, foamies or what most people, think you progress with, But yeah, no, just been doing it for a while, and aerobatics has definitely been a huge part from the get-go.
I think most of us do RC as a hobby. For some, it's bigger than others. But I think you also are involved in some capacity with RC and UAVs as a job, right? Like I just saw you kind of coming from, I think it's the exponential kind of UAV. How was that?
It's been really fun. So it's definitely been nice getting to take basically all the knowledge and everything that I've learned over the years in the RC world and move it into that. So I got into the UAV side of it probably about 4 years ago, and just been doing it ever since. So it's definitely pretty nice. It gets to be a little hard sometimes. So split the hobby and the work side. But I definitely enjoy both just as much as I've ever had before. So it's been very, very good.
And it seems like Extreme Flight might be getting a bit into that side of things now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm not sure how much you saw in the pictures, but Extreme Flight's definitely getting into that side. Help them develop a VTOL platform. So the company that I work for, it's called Sustainable Skylines. We actually started out with a 140 Bushmaster that I modified to be a vertical takeoff, and we use it to fly down Miami Beach. So we tow the same banner that like a Cessna would tow. Mm-hmm. So we tow a 15 by 30 size banner, and it all started off of a modified Bushmaster, and kind of helped them develop a whole platform. So they're definitely getting to the UAV side of the industry as well.
Do you get to do any crazy stuff with the UAVs, or you have to contain yourself and keep the Extreme Flight skills on the side while you're at work?
Definitely a little separate, but I can tell you for sure that knowing how to fly and how to save some stuff definitely comes into play every so often, especially in the early testing stages. So, don't quite do a lot of 3D with it, but it definitely comes in handy knowing what you're doing.
Yeah, makes sense. The other event, obviously, you just had recently is Joall, right? How was that Joall for you this year?
Oh man, Joall was awesome. So it's always, oh yeah, very wet, especially for the first couple of days. But it's still fun and get to see a bunch of people that you only see once a year. So I very much so love Joall, even if it's kind of hectic. Getting there and everything that comes along with it for all the companies and all that. But I definitely absolutely love Joall. So
yeah, it seems like especially for sponsored pilots. Come with the different companies. Seems like it's pretty fun, but pretty busy. We're like doing demos and different lines and
right. Oh yeah, I can tell you for sure that noon comes very quickly when you're trying to set up for demos and get everything lined up. You wake up, at 7 or 8, and 12 comes around very, very quick.
Yeah, it's also interesting how different companies have to cram a lot of different demos in a very short kind of flight slot, right? I know you guys were kind of like switching different planes, kind of coordinating to get as many things in front of people as possible.
Yeah, no. This year we actually did a ton, especially so this year they changed the format. It was only a 6-minute demo slot, so it makes it very tight to try and show a lot of stuff. But luckily we have a very good team, and everyone was very good about getting stuff going. So I think we actually showed basically a different plane, at every demo slot. So we were it was quite the hustle, but I think as a team we actually did pretty good.
Given that you've been doing this for such a long time at this high level, when you're doing something like one of those like noontime demos or one of those like night flight demos in front of so many people, do you still feel a bit of pressure, or are you totally relaxed these days? It's already like one more day.
Still a little bit of pressure. I think there's more pressure just getting there, just because you have to make sure like everything's ready to go. You don't want to be the guy that holds up the show and something's not working or something like that. So I think that's probably more pressure on the flying side. I've gotten to the point where unless it's more of a contest, the contest is a little bit more high pressure. But for the most part, like the demos and all that, I actually have a lot of fun with that. And it's nice. You get the air all to yourself. You kind of just get to fly and just be able to concentrate on that. So I actually think the demos are one of my favorite parts, and get to put on a show for everybody. So.
And I thought you guys were announcing at least one new model, right? The new 300, the new Strike 300, in different sizes.
Yep. So we unveiled the new extra this year. So we have the 67, the 92, and the 105. So basically revamped the whole 300 line of aircraft and added to the 67. So we've never had a 67 300. So added that one to the lineup as well. And so far, it's been very, very good, and everyone from the team that got a chance to fly it has been very, very happy with it.
One of the most common questions I see people have around, honestly, any brand, but in particular with Extreme Flight, is trying to understand the different models in the lineup. You have the 300, the NG, the 260, just in the extra side of things, and then you have the Slick, the Edge,
right?
So and the Laser. In your opinion, how does the 300 kind of compare to the rest of the lineup?
So the way that I normally see the lineup is more of a spectrum, and like there's just like a kind of where the planes fall in. So like normally the Slick is on the more aggressive side, so it's very fast, very aggressive. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have, for example, the Laser. So the 104 Laser's a lot more tamed, a lot more predictable, a little bit slower. So they kind of fall between those two lines. I would say the extra is probably a little bit closer to the Slick, actually. So it has the 300 has a very fast tail. So the NG normally has a little bit more side area in the back of the fuse, so it makes it fall a little bit more towards the middle. So I would say the 300 is a little bit closer to the Slick in the way that it likes to fly, and just how aggressive it is with the tumbles and how it exits, stalled maneuvers and so on.
How does it compare with the NG? I think I haven't been flying extreme flight planes that much lately, but the one I remember liking the most when I got to try a couple of different versions was the NG. I was very impressed with that plane. It was like a really nice balance between like that precision, but still fairly aggressive. Not as aggressive as the Slick, but you weren't missing tail authority or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I would say the NG is probably right in the middle spot of both of them. So you kind of get the very fast, aggressive flight envelope, but you still have the very controlled and very flowy feel of the airframe. So I think that one falls basically in the middle, and especially with the latest version. So we were flying those during the noontime demos as well with the three new schemes, and the new version is even better than the original. So we did some tweaks that I needed and did all the updates, and I think right now that's probably one of my favorites that I've been flying.
The other thing, I saw some pictures, if I didn't get to attend, but I saw some pictures, I think it was you and team giving some kind of like 3D setup seminar at Joall.
Yeah,
How was that?
We got to. It went really good. So there was a lot more people that showed up than I expected to, especially because it was Friday, so it was like the very last day of the event, basically right before the Nintendo demos. So we are like, oh man, we're probably gonna have 5 or 10 people, but I think we were in the 20s. So it went really good. We did some Q&As and basically just walked people how we normally attack the whole setup process for an airframe. So went over geometry and setting up the CG and how we check for CG and so on.
Any major highlights you can share?
I think the biggest thing that most people don't normally understand is, at least for me and a couple other guys on the team, we normally set up CG more to exit a maneuver cleanly rather than like just a normal inverted hands off. So for most of my planes, I actually can't even tell you like how much down elevator I have to give it to hold like inverted flight. So I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions on how we set up the airplanes. Is normally like, oh yeah, just make it tail heavy and make it hands off inverted. And for some airframes that works, and that is the perfect spot. But it'll make it so that you'll do a waterfall and it'll want to keep doing half a rotation by itself and so on. So we mostly set up the airframe just to exit maneuvers cleanly. So if you're doing a waterfall, there's a dip the wing or want to keep going, that normally means that it's tail heavy. If it's very slow and lethargic and you just can't get to come around, it's probably nose heavy. Same for tumbles and that sort of stuff. So normally that's how we approach the whole setup process. Is actually how it feels exiting maneuvers and entering maneuvers rather than just inverted feel of flight.
Yeah, so it sounds like for like this type of 3D XA planes, you're looking more at those kind of aggressive tumble, waterfall, crankshaft type maneuvers, and seeing how much how much inertia you get at the end when you're trying to neutralize or to exit. See if, if you're trying to fight the plane too much, or if the plane is actually hard to get in and out of it.
Oh yep, exactly. And especially now with basically any newer airframe, whether pilot, flex, extreme flight, the tail authority that we have on the airplanes nowadays it's huge compared to how it was 10, 15 years ago, where you did have to make it tail heavy just to be able to make the maneuver happen. Yep. So I think that's the biggest difference, just how much better the airfoils have gone and just overall designs have gotten, that you don't necessarily have to run it tail heavy to be able to do what you see all of us doing with 3D or XA or anything like that. So I think that's probably the biggest takeaway from the whole seminar that we had, is that don't just go off of that and then you start running into other issues.
Any other either misconceptions or kind of common mistakes that you see people make either on the setup side or on the flying side of things for like 3D and XA?
Not exactly. So a big one that like always comes up is always geometry. So obviously that tends to be a pretty big one, whether you're running gyros or anything like that. I think most people get lost in just getting max throw and expecting that to be the best, but in reality, for the most part, we run anywhere between 50 to 60 degrees on the elevator and, roughly 45 to 50 on the rudder, and that tends to be enough. So a lot of people also think that you just need to go to the longest arm and get the most amount of travel possible until you're like hitting the bevel, and that's not quite, the case nowadays. So like I said before, with the older airframes, you kind of have to do it just to be able to get close to what we're able to do nowadays. But just the more resolution, the better it is, especially for the more precise style of flying. So if you have a really long arm, it makes it really hard to do a slow roll down the runway. You lose so much resolution and so much torque off center that it is actually really, really noticeable. So even just going one hole in on the arm sometimes makes a huge difference, and you don't lose roll rate or tail authority. Yeah. So I think that's another big one that people get caught up in.
Yeah, the other thing related to that, I always see people in any field is I think that they underestimate the amount of stress you put on the servos when you start going with longer arms. Like once you obviously for 3D and XA you obviously need longer arms than standard, but yeah, the smaller you can keep them, the more you will protect the servos. Doesn't matter if they're like $200 awesome servos, still is a lot of torque, a lot of stress being put on every element in there.
Oh yeah, no, especially all the high energy and all that stuff. I mean, you wear out servos really quick with long arms, that's for sure. So the tighter you can keep that servo arm, the longer they'll last you.
Yeah, I still cannot believe that the planes these days can withstand the type of maneuvers we do with them, because it feels incredible they are as light as they are and that they don't just snap in half. But yeah, all that stress goes to the servos.
Right. Oh yeah. No, it's pretty insane what we're capable. I mean, we got to the point where like you really don't have to worry about the airframe breaking anymore, which is pretty insane. I mean, I'm sure you remember, a couple of years ago, you had to be careful with the wings and so on, just because it was a common thing that if you flew it really hard, you would definitely blow wings off of airframes. So it's really impressive how far that whole side of the industry has come.
Yeah. No, maybe like 14 years ago or so was when I was flying pretty constantly in competition back in Europe, and I took a long break of almost 10 years. So I think back then I was flying like a Hangar 9 Extra 260, I think. It was like the first kind of slightly XA plane that I got my hands on. It was a bit more aggressive than the default planes over there. And when I came back in like 2019, I remember looking at your videos, looking at Jesse's videos, and looking at those crazy crankshafts and super aggressive blenders. And it took me a while to get comfortable enough to execute those maneuvers at that speed, because not the difficulty, like it's not that much harder to do it faster and slow, but it's just the concern of, is this thing going to break? Because back then those planes were not able to deal with that. Like you would bend wing tubes, you would like crack a wing.
Oh yeah, back then it was aluminum wing tubes too. It wasn't even carbon fiber. Like carbon fiber was an upgraded wing tube that it was a huge deal. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's been awesome to see the evolution on all the equipment.
Yeah, no, and it just keeps getting better and better. So it's crazy to think where airframes are going to be 5 or 10 years from now, just because of how good they've gone this far.
Yeah, I was talking when I was talking to Ben a few months ago. He was kind of mentioning how there's this chicken and egg problem where like the pilots keep like pushing a bit more, and then the plane gets better, but the pilot now is able to push a bit more. So it's always like a catch-up game for everybody.
Oh yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, but there is also such a thing as a right way to fly hard. So obviously, you can still break an airframe if you really wanted to, and you don't do maintenance on it. You can definitely still break any airplane out there. But
yeah, the other plane I've been really enjoying watching you fly is the really big Extra 260. That's the 120-inch Extra, right?
Yeah.
With the DA200. Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Like I think if you're not looking and you hear it, you can definitely say, you can tell that that Santi's flying the big 200.
Right. Oh yeah. No, that plane's awesome, and it's crazy to think that. So I worked with them to help them bring that one to life basically, and the original goal was to make something that was pretty good for me to be able to fly at the shootout. So it's crazy to think that the same airframe you're seeing me fly 3D with right now and doing demos and all that is the same one that I was competing with in IMAC at the shootout and invitational.
Are you just changing the elevators there between 3D and IMAC, or are you using okay? Everything else is the same.
Yeah. So everything else is the same. We have two different versions of the elevator. So one with a counterbalance, one without. Obviously, the one without I run shorter arms because you don't need that much throw for IMAC. But other than that, the rest of the airplane is completely the same. So there's no different wings, nothing else different in the airframe.
Now it looks great in flight. I haven't seen it in kind of flying IMAC sequences in person, but when I see you doing the freestyle routine, it looks obviously a bit lazier than the typical 120cc plane. It's bigger, but it looks pretty capable. And if it's a matter of just switching the stabs to be able to go and do a good job in a IMAC invitational sequence, I think you got like 4th or 5th place, right, in invitational last year.
Yeah, somewhere around there. Yeah, I think it was 5th. Yeah,
that's pretty impressive.
Oh yeah,
pretty much everybody else in invitational is probably using like extremely custom planes, like cam areas or car for things like that for IMAC.
Right. Yeah. No, I was the only off there, so I was definitely pretty happy with it, especially so the airplane actually showed up. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks before the shootout, so it wasn't even like it was like months of testing leading up to or anything like that. So it was very last minute, but felt really good with the airframe and figured to go for it with that one. But yeah, no, I've been very very happy with it and super competitive. So I definitely don't feel like it's a drawback, and it came out super light, super straight, and it just presents so well in the air.
Is the DA200 the recommended engine for either IMAC or 3D? Like if somebody just wants to do IMAC or if somebody just wants to do 3D, would you still go for that DA200?
Yeah. So most setups are really good. Obviously, the 200 for IMAC, you can't really beat it. For just all-out freestyle in 3D, the DA180 is actually working really really good for it. So we're actually running that in the other one. So there's currently 2 of them. Tim has one. That one has my 180 on it, and it flies extremely good and super light and tons of power. It feels a lot closer to the 120, and I think out of a hover, it might outpull a 120 cc airplane. Out of a hover in a drag race. So it's super impressive, and we'll see how next year goes. But maybe next time I do freestyle, I might even just build one of those just strictly for freestyle to compete with.
Nice.
So
That'd be pretty impressive.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And speaking of the Tucson Shootout, I know you've been going to that competition a good amount of times now. I think, at least for me, I've always seen it as a pretty special competition. A lot of like the best pilots in the world, and through the past 20 years, they've been going there. And I think after the TOC is like the next big event I can think of for IMAC for freestyle.
Right.
How did you like the slightly new format this past year on the freestyle side with the not just the 4-minute Ara Musical,
right.
but also
doing the smack as well.
How was that?
Yeah, no, it was fun. So I mean, it definitely threw quite a twist, just because normally in your generic IMAC configuration, that's never been a thing. So I definitely think it was it was pretty cool, and I love seeing different stuff being done. I feel like after a while, most people get bored and, it's all repetitive. So it is also kind of nice, you have your actual routine and you fly that routine identical at the same time. And, now you also have a flight where you can just fly and, kind of just show off how good of a pilot you are, not just how good of a routine you're making and your music choice and how you have it choreographed and so on. So I definitely think it was definitely pretty cool just having a different side of that as well.
I remember, I think it was on one of your smack flights. I remember that crazy torque roll entry, that like Santi slide kind of thing.
Right.
That was mind blowing. That was so good. And I think I don't think the music in theory is a factor on the scoring, but I think you got the entry right at the right spot on the Linkin Park song. That was awesome.
Oh yeah, I wish I could say that was planned, but I just happened to get lucky that I lined it up for that one. But yeah, no, choreography on that one didn't really matter. So I was kind of just flying, and it just happened to work out pretty good.
Yeah, no, I hadn't seen anything like that before. It was really really good. That's basically kind of like the typical slide you do, but slightly modified exit, right? Like you just end up, rather than exiting kind of on a positive harrier, you end up like kind of vertical, right?
Yeah, it's done the exact same way. It looks a lot different, and it's actually a lot harder just because you're basically coming at yourself. So you kind of have to, plan ahead on like when you're going to stop and how much it plays the effect. Yeah. No, but it's actually the exact same thing. You just finish it in a hover, and it's just coming at you. So it's a little bit different perspective on it, but it's the same maneuver still.
Yep. A couple months ago, I made a video tutorial of that maneuver. A lot of people actually asked.
Yeah, I saw that.
Is that close enough to how you like? I didn't ask you.
Yeah.
I tried to figure out on my own a bit on the simulator and then in the real plane until I got something that kind of worked consistently. Is that more or less the way you do it, or any criticisms there?
Oh yeah. No, that was basically it. So the thing with that maneuver is that it's actually like it's almost completely different with every airframe, just because a lot of it comes into how the tail wants to let go into the stall and like return back from it. So every plane likes it a little bit differently. The thing I've noticed is like the entry speed is actually like the most crucial part of that whole maneuver on like how it's going to exit. Because obviously, I'm sure you've tried it enough times that like if you're going a little too fast, it wants to exit nose down every single time. So the entry speed is probably the most crucial thing with any airplane. But yeah, it's that one's a hard one to kind of teach and explain, just because every plane is 100% different, and CG plays a huge factor into that as well. So you actually did a really good job making the video of that. So
what I found, and I still do sometimes when I haven't been flying for a while, or it's as you said, a new plane, is that when you mess up, it's like it happens too fast. Like you have to practice enough until the timing comes kind of automatic. You cannot be really thinking about it. It's kind of like a crankshaft. You cannot be thinking about it through the maneuver, because by the time you start thinking about it, it's already done and you're already inverted or doing something bad.
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely quite a tough one, and it's hard to bring it down low, just because once you're low and you mess it up a little bit, and it's definitely hidden. So it's quite a high stakes maneuver, but when you do it, it does come out pretty cool.
It looks really cool. Like if you slow down a video or you look at some pictures, you get some positions of the plane that look really, really scary, like with the nose basically pointing straight down at a few feet from the ground. It's you can tell that if you mess up, it's gonna be pretty catastrophic.
Yep, exactly.
How did you come up with that maneuver? Same simulator or?
No, just messing around. So yeah, just playing around. So I think I'm just always trying to find something different to do, just to change it up, and that one actually took me a little while. So like I kind of had like the idea in my head, and the execution was a little hard to do, to bring it from what I had planned and how it actually wants to be performed in the air. So yeah, no, I'm also used to simulator for just making freestyle routines actually. So most of the time I just go out to the field and fly.
No, you're definitely one of those pilots that's definitely pretty fun to watch. Not just because you're very precise, you're very aggressive, you're always very close to the ground, but also because then you're pretty original. I know I've often seen you doing some kind of unusual, cool maneuvers. I recall now a couple of times I've seen you do this thing. I don't even know how you call it, but you go kind of like pretty fast and you do like some rudder and I don't even know how to call it. Like a back and forth, more like precise than 3D, but looks like pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's surprisingly much harder than people would think it is to do properly and precisely.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, especially that tight, because you're right at the edge of like that high speed stall. So if you pull a little too hard on the backside going towards the ground, you'll definitely just drop a wing. So, but yeah, no, fun fact on that one: there's zero rudder the whole time.
Really?
So, yeah, it's just aileron and elevator.
Okay.
So
I assume that you would be
it's just a matter of committing.
to nudge the plane there. Okay. Do you have a name for that maneuver?
No, there's no name. I mean, yeah, just do it every so often. But it's another one that it's pretty high stakes, and obviously on that one, doing it high, like it kind of just looks like you're kind of just going back and forth. So like it has to be low to the ground, and I've gotten pretty close to almost not pulling out before. So I do it every so often.
Well, I think I mentioned before, I wanted to cover a bunch of topics on IMAC because you've been, pretty successful in very high level IMAC competitions. I got a bunch of good questions, specifically. I think somebody by the name 3D Holic Pilot from Instagram, they sent me a lot of really good questions. I don't think we'll get to all of them, but so maybe we can start with why do you think IMAC is useful, not just for the people that obviously want to be good at IMAC, but even for the pilots that are just very focused on 3D, XA, freestyle. What are your thoughts on people doing some level of IMAC if they only care about like freestyle?
I think the biggest difference you'll notice with people that do a lot of IMAC is that you kind of learn how to place the plane where you need it for the next thing that you're doing. So I think that's what a lot of people that have only done freestyle, for example, so people that don't fly IMAC but they'll go to freestyle events, they'll struggle once it starts to get, for example, really windy. You start to have an issue because you're kind of just trying to do what you have planned in your head, but you start to fall behind on where the plane has to be for the next maneuver, for example. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that you'd be able to take away from IMAC, even if you weren't, necessarily trying to do, just IMAC and actually compete in it, is just learning how to place the plane where you need it for the next thing to be able to line up better.
Yeah, I agree. I think you can often, I don't think it's a complete requirement. I think it often helps a lot of people kind of build that mindset of proper placement, always being precise, making sure that you're like you're the one telling the plane where to go and not just doing a crankshaft tendency where it comes out.
Right.
And I think some people without any IMAC practice or background, they get that. But I think a lot of people just focus so much on the cool signing maneuver they see in a video that's the only thing they care about. And everything in between and the exits and placement and wind compensation they don't think about.
Right. Oh yeah, a lot of it too, and like how good of a flight is just how good you can flow it all together. So if you can definitely place it where the airplane has to be, so you can present it better. It only makes it look that much better, even if you're not doing anything different than you normally would. Mm-hmm. So it's not just the individual maneuver; it's kind of the whole flow as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about your IMAC typical setup. So let's say, last year with this 120-inch 260, you got it a few weeks before the shootout. How do you go about getting it ready?
So that one's a little bit tougher just because IMAC planes normally take a little bit more setup just to be, really, really good. So, normally I'll even mess with, thrust line and stuff like that just to, get it right where I want to. So, some planes like a little bit more down thrust than others just to track a little bit better and exit stuff a little bit better. So that one's a little more complicated, but normally I'll start by just setting the snap rates. So, especially in the higher classes, there's a lot of snaps, so it's kind of one of the more crucial parts of it. So normally it's just finding the right amount of aileron for the airplane to do, the snap at a good speed, but not so much that it kind of stalls out the surface so much that it makes the exits inconsistent. So, I found that most planes that you set up for IMAC, the sweet spot's between like 25 to 30 degrees of aileron. So somewhere around there, you'll notice that the snaps become more consistent just because the airflow doesn't really completely stall over the wing to the point where it has to noticeably fly further to be able to stop properly. So the more consistent in the aileron so you can get it for the snaps, the better. So that's usually where I spend a lot of time. And then after that, it'd be just CG along with mixing. So knife edge mixing, downline and upline mixing. And that's basically it. So there's not a ton to it. It's just a lot of trial and error. So for anyone trying to set up an IMAC plane, definitely try a couple different things. So
with you were mentioning those snap rates, are you using different kind of dual rates across your IMAC flight?
Yeah, I mostly fly in snap rates the whole time. Okay. So I have 3 rates. There's a roller rate, so it's a lot less aileron and more elevator and rudder for the rollers, just to be able to do them smoother and have a little bit extra in case I need it. And then it'd be the snap rate, and then there's a spin or hammerhead rate, which is just a lot of rudder, just to be able to get the hammerhead to come over cleanly, or if you're doing a spin, just to be able to really get it to have a nice cone when you're doing the spin. But other than that, 95% of the flight is normally just in snap rate, so it's that high rate aileron. And that's normally where I fly most of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in my experience, definitely snap rolls are one of the hardest maneuvers to get right, both for like freestyle pilots in their freestyle routines, but even IMAC pilots that are totally dedicated to IMAC, it's very, very common to see kind of mistakes with snap rolls, right? Like it's very, very difficult to get a clean entry with that kind of brake on the elevator and kind of a precise exit on the right spot, right? It's very easy to under or overroll. It sounds like having that kind of sweet spot in terms of aileron throws is a big deal for you. Any other techniques you found or any other tips that you can give people to kind of improve their snap rolls?
Man, yeah, I think the biggest thing that I see people have mistakes with is that, so for example, like if you have a snap roll on like an up 45, like you'll do it a certain way, and then they'll have one on a downline, for example, and it's going a little faster, so they kind of like hesitate or kind of just do like half of the input that they normally do, and you start to get all the inconsistencies out of there. So at that point you're kind of just praying that you'll let go of the sticks basically when it's the right time, rather than if you hit the snap just as hard every time with the elevator on the entry and going into the snap, you'll have a lot more success just because it'll feel more natural the whole time. So I think not babying the snaps would probably be the the biggest thing I would say. Just make them the same every single time.
So I guess trying to keep things consistent, and also that probably involves trying to keep a very consistent speed regardless of your airplane orientation and position, right? Doesn't matter if you're going up line, down line,
Right.
45.
Yep, definitely. So, and again, every plane's a little different, but most of you can get it up to feel very consistent throughout the whole envelope of the IMAC routine. So it's just a matter of dialing everything in to be the same every single time.
What's been interesting to see in the past few years, I don't think this is a maneuver that you see in IMAC sequences. I don't think. But this snap rolls that kind of bring you down. I guess I don't know how to explain it. If you're, for example, in knife edge, usually you would
a down snap basically.
Down
so you're
snap.
going towards,
Do you guys have those these days in IMAC sequences?
Yep.
Okay.
Especially in the higher classes. So you normally won't see it until I think there's actually one in the unlimited sequence this year. So I haven't really looked at it yet, but I think last time I saw it, there was one on the sequence on like an up 45, like you have to snap down. So we definitely are starting to have a lot more of those in IMAC.
Those are particularly tricky, and I think people that are relatively newer to snap rolls, or they're doing freestyle routine with those kind of like low to the ground. Those are particularly tricky and potentially scary. I think you have to be very mindful about that initial break with elevator, just enough to sew it, but don't go crazy, and then try to recover a little bit with the rudder.
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. It definitely throws in a little extra spice into the snap, just because it's completely different than what you intuitively want to do. So,
I think the other big thing in my mind with IMAC competitions are the unknowns. I think very often you can see really good pilots with a lot of training, and they all look pretty much the same when you are doing the known sequences, but now you throw them into an unknown, and that's where you can see major differences. How do you go about preparing for unknowns? In terms of like practicing before the competition, and then at the competition itself, how do you go about it?
So I think for the unknowns, actually the most important part is whoever you have calling for you. So whoever you have, saying the maneuvers, that's probably the biggest part of it. So normally I have my friend Kim Quinnett. So we've been flying AMAC basically since we both started. So we're both very familiar with how we like everything called out and how to line everything up. So so you have like a hammerhead coming up, and you're on the right side of the box and it's on the left side. It's like we'll tell each other like, okay, like get to the left side of the box, then pull up for the up line, and then do all that. So that definitely helps, just taking the load off of trying to figure out how to place everything. But other than that, it's just a lot of practice. So we used to do we grab a bunch of random sequences, and we actually wouldn't even look at them. We just like hand each other the sheets, and we had to call it without even knowing what was coming up. So that was definitely some good practice. But just knowing that you can do it, and just trying to remember how you need to stop those snaps, because that's the hardest part of an unknown, is second guessing, especially after a long contest like the shootout. In Invitational, I think we have 5 unknowns by the end of the week.
Wow.
On top of 3 known sequences. So they all kind of start to blend in together. Yeah. So at that point is when you just have to trust the caller, and try and write down how to exit a snap, because when you have a positive 1 3/4, for example, it goes by pretty quick, and if you don't remember if you're supposed to exit upright or inverted, it'll make or break you. So the collar is a huge part in the whole unknown section.
Yeah, having especially somebody that you are familiar with, right? That you work well together.
Yeah.
And you have that consistency on how to call and when to call certain things.
Yep, exactly. And
do you try to memorize or visualize the sequence events before the flight, or do you kind of mostly rely on only the color?
At the contest, I will have it fairly memorized, but personally for me, I find that if you have it too memorized, like it makes it a lot harder, just because you almost start to second guess yourself on a lot of stuff. So I'll normally have it fairly memorized, and I'll kind of know the maneuvers individually, but I rely on the caller to kind of tell me which one's next, just so I can concentrate more on the individual maneuvers rather than the whole sequence as a whole. So normally I'll just look at it a couple hours before I have to fly it, and just have it fairly memorized, but not like 100%. Like I don't think I could fly the unknown without a caller.
I was asking you before about kind of that handling of the pressure around demos. You mentioned that there's not so much, but potentially in competitions, it's a bit different.
Right.
Yeah, how do you usually go about handling that type of pressure in those like really major competitions where you are always a really good pilot with a lot of experience, but you're also competing against a bunch of other really good pilots with a lot of experience. So any little mistakes and little improvements or problems you have in the flight can make or break your scoring, right?
Yeah, no, it honestly just comes with time. So obviously, when I first started competing, it was a ton of pressure and it was super difficult, and it's a lot to deal with. But the more I've done it, the easier it's gotten. And I think what helps the most is just say like you miss a snap, slightly, kind of just forget about it and just keep flying. So don't let one little thing kind of ruin the rest of your flight just because you miss one. You'd be surprised how much better you'll do, overall if you just concentrate on like whatever's next and you try and do that still, as if everything else has been perfect. So yeah, no, it's a lot more enjoyable competing and doing demos and all that nowadays. But I can definitely tell you when I started, it was a lot more high pressure, and I think it's almost funny looking back, especially flying in the lower sequences and stuff like that. Just thinking, like how stressed I was about, doing a reverse shark tooth instead of a normal shark tooth, and in an unknown or something like that. So yeah, just the more you can compete and the more you can do all this, the easier it gets. But don't let the little things kind of ruin the whole flight and get hung up in it. It's probably huge as well.
I think I remember many years ago hearing, I think it was Domenicini had some special, I don't know, some special jeans or some special belt that he would wear for like particularly important competitions. Do you have any particular thing, any particular routine, ritual you do pre-competition, or not really?
No, not me. I don't really think there's anything special I do. Kind of just try and get ready for it, and that's about it. Yeah, just do what you've been practicing. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, hopefully, go into a contest prepared, but technically, you just have to do the same thing you've been doing in practice. So it's just replicating the same thing.
One of the things that always comes up when talking to people about aerobatic competitions is the judging. Is how hard is to get consistent, accurate judging, because we're all human, because
right.
Especially at the highest levels, the flights are very similar, right? So any one or two extra points here and there can make a big difference. Have you, in your experience, found judging being pretty consistent across different competitions, or have you run into that kind of situation where certain times you don't quite agree with what you're seeing in the scores?
Yes and no. I think for the most part, it's not as bad as people make it seem. So generally at most contests, you'll have pretty much the same judging. I think one thing to take into factor is that some judges like some things a little bit differently. So it helps if you look at some of the other flights and see how other people are placing and kind of trying to get an idea on what the judges at that event kind of want to see. So yeah, but overall, I find that most judges will be consistent, at least in like the way that they like to judge. So if you can find whatever the judge prefers, then you can definitely get your scores up that way as well. So
have you seen this new system that has been developed? I think it's called flight codes or flight code system, to try to semi-automate or automate some of that stuff. I think their goal is to try to use GPS and other sensor data to try to kind of automate the scoring within, like making it score as if it was a jazz. Like they're still taking into account the perspective and everything. What are your thoughts on that as a potential future thing?
I actually think it's a good approach. So I was actually talking to Kevin about that because he's the one that runs the shootout, and personally, we'll see which way they go. But I think that if they do the flight coach stuff, for example, to judge like geometry and placement, it'd be really good, and then keep like actual human judges for like snaps and point rolls, for example. That way, you kind of lessen the load on what the judge
like an hybrid.
Yeah, Yep, exactly. So you can kind of have a little bit of both still, and you know, I think if you lessen the judge having to to do just absolutely everything and worry about like, oh man, like was that element centered as well as was the radius the same and all that. If you just have them go for like, oh yeah, like they hit those points and the snap is a 2-point deduction. You kind of bring those scores together. I feel like that would work really, really good. Obviously, it's still going to be a lot of testing, I would imagine, with getting the software just right. And I wouldn't be surprised if we go to a very strict judging criteria, and we have the flight coach running. I wouldn't be surprised if you only see like a high of a 2 or a 3 on a score, because in reality it's very hard to do it perfectly. But we might run into a point where even doing a loop, like, it'll look off on the ground, but it'll judge perfectly on flight coach. So there's going to be a lot of learning from both the people trying to run it and the pilots if we switch to that format.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I think there'll be something that sounds really interesting to remove some of those kind of inconsistencies or biases. But it's interesting thinking about potential hybrid ways of using it. But yeah, either way, there's going to be a big ramp up in terms of tweaking the algorithms, figure out the best equipment, figure out what to do when something fails and now you don't have the score because the GPS dropped. And giving people also the confidence, right? Like, especially at the beginning, until it's a proven system, people will be very skeptical.
Right. Yeah. No, but I mean, I think it's good seeing the push for trying to make it better. So I think that's the biggest takeaway is the whole trying to get rid of how you mentioned the human factor in the middle and bias judging and so on. So I definitely think it's a good step in the right direction.
Before moving on, any final kind of words of advice for people potentially getting into IMAC or people that are flying IMAC and want to go to the next level?
Yeah, no, I think the biggest thing would be just don't get discouraged. I think even when I started flying IMAC, it was like, man, like, I don't know, like, why my scores are looking so bad and all that. But it's funny going back, like, after you've been doing it for a while, just seeing how much better you're actually doing everything, to where there's a lot of stuff you don't see up until like you really start getting good at it, and you start being able to tell what the plane's actually doing. So it kind of sucks in the beginning, but it's definitely a really good discipline to get into, and you just got to stick with it. And it's definitely very fulfilling being able to go out and fly the same thing over and over again and start seeing your mistakes and improving on it. So I think that's probably the most rewarding part of IMAC, is just being able to actually see the improvement.
I should ask you before I forget, because I know people are going to ask about this. And you mentioned how you have different rates for your IMAC airplanes. How do you set up your radio for your freestyle planes? Let's say a typical 120cc plane. Do you have multiple rates? Do you have single rate? How do you approach that?
Yep, just single rate, and then every radio is a little bit different. Normally I run anywhere between 40 and 50% expo on all the surfaces. So I mostly try to make it so that every plane that I have basically feels very similar in setup, so I can kind of just pick up any of them and go fly. Granted, they're all slightly different and they all have their own personalities on how they like to fly, but the setups are basically identical on every single airplane for freestyle and 3D. And just one rate and just dialing in the expo to where it feels good.
Go-to equipment, I'm guessing, is the A120. You use GR servos, right? What servos are you running lately?
I run a couple of them. So for the IMAX stuff, on the ailerons, I normally do 8955s. So those are the super fast servos. And then for freestyle, since they take a little bit more abuse, I normally run 8911s or 8912s if I want to do 3-cell. So that's basically most of my airplanes run a mixture of those setups.
Cool. One thing I've been seeing you more of lately is flying jets. How's that going?
Pretty good, actually. For the most part, I actually mostly fly them at events or leading up to events, just because it's kind of a hassle a lot of times to go to the field, and especially here, I don't have a lot of fields that are jet friendly. So for the most part, it's mostly at events, but it's definitely pretty cool, and I enjoy every bit of it. So it's definitely a nice little curveball, and getting to go out and fly, especially all the newer stuff. It's no longer like your normal jet that you just fly circles around. So it's kind of cool seeing what the airframe can actually do, and trying to mimic basically what we're doing with a 120cc airplane with a jet.
Is the Skywing Falcon the first thrust vector jet you've been flying consistently?
Yeah, that's the first one. I mean, that's definitely the first like actual 3D jet I've had. So it's definitely been a pretty cool experience. And actually, I just brought back one of the 2.1s with me, so hopefully get to fly it some more now.
How has been the kind of the learning curve for the transition from prop 3D to jet 3D so far?
I think just the scary factor is the biggest thing to overcome. So obviously, they have a ton of power and they go super fast, but as soon as you put it vertical, you lose almost all of it. So it's just a little bit of a different curve, and just getting used to how it's going to exit, just building up the confidence to know, like, oh yeah, like if I do this, like it is going to come out. So it's definitely a little bit differently just on the throttle and how much more tip stall it is than your average 3D plane. But no, it's been very good and been pretty exciting. Just changing it up a little bit.
Yeah, for me that throttle lag and especially the combination of much higher cost plus the fact that the recovery from a bad situation is much. It requires much more altitude, right? Like with a prop plane, unless you are doing something right next to the ground, you can often recover with the right stick inputs and full throttle. You can most of the time recover with
but with jets, you have the inertia and you have all the speed, and they don't like to fly as low as some of the 3D planes we have. So it's definitely quite different.
Yeah, it's definitely been interesting to see the past few years, like the development of some of the new airframes. How I would say a couple years ago, Luca Baumann with that Krill model RS, I think it is, and doing some beginnings of like 3D rolling Harriers. Then Gastaldi, also with the RS and the J10, starting to do like rolling loops and stuff like that. And lately, you probably saw Ryu with the Matrix. That's starting to get really close to the kind of flight you would see with a prop XA plane. Like that's actual 3D, not just 3D, but actually extreme aerobatics type maneuvers. That's getting crazy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, it's been a huge jump. I think just like actual factories getting into it that are just 3D airframes. So like Pilot and Extreme Flight and Skywing. I think that's where we're seeing the big change just from all those companies starting to get into that side of the RC world and trying to mimic kind of their core values on how they want their airplanes to fly. So I think it's definitely been a huge change on the jet airframe technology in the last couple of years.
Do you see yourself getting more into that side of things, more like 3D?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it'd be cool. I mean, you never know. I know the last XSC we did have like a jet category, so that was cool. So you never know. Maybe one of these days we'll have something else like that pop up, and you'll get a lot of the big names just coming out with jets and really pushing what we can start doing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think having some competition around like maybe freestyle. I know there's some like what's called F3S. I think it's like the jet version of F3 or IMAC. It'd be interesting to have something like that also for freestyle, because I think when you have like an XFC, Tucson Aerobatic Shootout, that's when you get people actually starting to train and develop new maneuvers and new routines and push hard. And that's how the kind of the sport moves forward, right? It's too bad they're so expensive.
I know that is the hard part, but that's kind of one of the factors in it. But I think they're only going to keep getting cheaper and better at this point. So you never know where that's going to lead. So.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about is your role within Extreme Flight. You obviously do a lot of work as a demo pilot and a lot of the marketing side of things. But I know that you've also been pretty involved with them around development and testing, right? How's that been?
It's been great. So I've known Tim and Ben for quite a while. So it's definitely really, really nice to be able to work with them. But I've been lucky enough to be able to do a lot of testing and development for a lot of the airplanes coming out. So we basically try and make sure that it's the best possible version of that airframe that we can make. And it's just been really, really good and very, very easy to work with any changes that have to happen. So even on the 120, we've made a couple of different versions of airfoils that we've tested on it and stuff like that. And it's definitely really nice being able to have the option to try different things and optimize the airplane as much as we possibly can, just so we have the best product possible.
You used to be in the West Coast, but I think you are now pretty close to them over there, right?
Yeah, so I used to live in California, and then I moved to Maryland for a few years, and I'm actually in Florida.
Oh, you're in Florida, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I think they're like 7 or 8 hours away, so still get to go to the warehouse every so often, and pick up planes, or we'll go flying for a weekend if there's something that we have to test and so on. So it's been really, really good.
Nice, yeah. It must be fun getting to have a significant input on what's next and how this plane should be flying, or how it should be behaving differently.
Right. Yeah. No, it's definitely a lot of fun. So I'm pretty lucky with that aspect.
One question I also often get, and I think you might be a good person to ask about, is sponsorships. I think a lot of people see sponsor pilots, and they obviously know that they have the basic idea of you have to fly pretty well and you have to be kind of supposing the brand. But I think a lot of people still don't fully understand how to get those type of opportunities and what does it actually mean to be sponsored pilot, to be representing a company. Can you speak a bit to that?
Yeah, I think especially nowadays is a little bit different than it was like back when I started. So, back then it was a lot of just going to events and, trying to support and stuff like that. Nowadays, I think social media is, one of the bigger factors on that sort of things. So the more you're, posting and, the more you can do on that side, I feel like the more that it helps down the line for, trying to support a company. But yeah, just a lot of attendance at events and just trying to have, a good reputation on like, oh yeah, that guy's, fun to hang out with and super helpful and stuff like that. So, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how good of a pilot you are if people don't like hanging out with you whenever you go somewhere and stuff like that. That has a lot to do with it as well. But social media, I would say, is a huge chunk of that opportunity coming up. So the more you can post and the more you do, the better chances you'll have. And I'd say that's probably the biggest thing to really try and do if you're trying to get sponsored by a company.
Yeah, no, to reiterate on that, I think people often overestimate the kind of the flying side of things, but I think it's important. But that's definitely not sufficient, right? I think
right.
Sponsorship is not like a prize that you get if you fly well enough or if you are able to do these maneuvers, this right. Ground. It's more like, at the end of the day, it's like a not quite a job because you're not actually getting paid most of the time, but it's an exchange. Like you are promoting this brand, you're helping bring awareness or provide technical support in a sense of discounts, free airframe, whatever. Like it can be a number of different things.
Right. Oh yeah.
But if you are not helpful, if you are not visible, whether it's in events or social media, doesn't really matter how good of a pilot you are. That's not useful to any company, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, there's kind of some responsibilities. I guess is probably the best way to put it on what comes with it. So obviously, I think a lot of people see it as like, like this company giving me this, but it is kind of a mutual exchange. It's like, what can you also do for the company to help it get pushed forward, get more exposure, get in front of people. So I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions is just like, like you get sponsored, like they just give you airplanes and that's really the end of it. But, for the most part, I still pay for stuff. I mean, if you go up, like most of the planes that I'm flying, I have some, 2-year-old airframes. So it's not just like, you just get new airplanes all the time and stuff like that. I fixed up quite a few planes. I mean, even my 260. So, I think you saw I broke the tail on that one at the shootout. Before that, I actually cartwheeled it at the King of Freestyle. I'm still flying the same one. So, it's not just like, you're breaking like, here's a new airplane. So, I think that's a huge misconception on how it actually works.
I agree. I think I very often will see people either in person events or in comments to videos that say, "Oh yeah, like I could do that too if I was getting like free planes," because they see your other pilots flying pretty hard, and one, they're probably not getting all the stuff for free like you think, and two, they that's the way they fly, right? Like that's you're trying to do the best you can with your limitations, and if you thought you were like most of the time you're not crashing because that's you're in control, right? And sometimes the crash happens, and it's definitely not because you're being reckless because you're getting free planes anyways if you crash.
Right. Oh yeah. No, it's never like that. So that's definitely a huge misconception. So
yeah. You mentioned before simulator. You pretty much only use it these days for kind of designing new freestyle routine, right? Do you? I guess what's your typical kind of practice routine, if any? Like I know many times we'll just go fly for fun. Are you only seeing like those like more dedicated practice sessions when you're preparing to fly some kind of like IMAC contest, or do you have particular sessions where even if it's just freestyle, you want to kind of nail these maneuvers? Like how do you think about practice, keeping your skills up, improving?
Yeah. For the most part, I actually kind of just fly for fun unless there's a big contest coming up. So I still enjoy it as a hobby. So I still go out and I'll take foamies out or just random stuff to go fly just because I still enjoy it. For the most part, I think I normally go flying maybe once or twice a week if I have the time, and for the most part, I normally take a 35% plane just to fly, and I'll do 1 or 3 flights on it per day. So it's not quite as much as people think, and I still do it just for fun. So unless the shootout's coming up or an IMAC contest or a freestyle contest, I won't really just go out and just hammer flights out back to back, just trying to perfect something. So for the most part, I'm kind of just enjoying it.
If you had to pick just only one plane to fly forever, what's your choice?
Man,
I know it's a hard one.
Yeah. I think that's the hardest question so far. I don't know. I think right now I'm really liking the NG. I think it's a good mixture of everything. Just it's not really lacking in any department. I would say it's just one of the most well-rounded airframes. But I will say that the 260 is a close second. It's just a little bit slower, so it's a bigger plane. It presents really good. But if I had to choose one to be able to do the very fast, aggressive XA and all that, I think the NG would probably be it.
Have you been flying that new T-Cab at all? That looks pretty cool. That's a totally different.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I got a couple of flights on it, and it's insanely how good and how fun that thing is.
Looks fun.
So I got no, I've been getting to fly. I got to fly a couple of the prototypes and did the demo on it last year's null. I think we actually made the teacup with the 200 like during the noontime demos. Like I think that was the first flight.
Nice.
So yeah, it was during the noontime demos. So but no, it's an awesome airplane, super forgiving, and I think it's kind of one of those planes that you want to just go to the field and just grab a lawn chair and just sit down and just putt around and do touch and goes with, but it still does all the XA aerobatic stuff. So it's very similar to the Bushmaster, just cub-like and even bigger.
Cool. Well, I think we are just over an hour. I know you're a busy guy, so I don't want to keep you here forever. Just to wrap this up, you've been pretty successful in the RC world, right? You've been very accomplished in IMAC and freestyle. You have a lot of sponsors. You've been a lot of cool events, flying a lot of really awesome planes. Are there any specific goals or milestones that you feel like you would like to accomplish? Anything in your future, whether it's like flying, mentoring, aircraft design? Is there anything that you would like to get to?
Nothing right now. I think I'm pretty lucky to have been able to do everything that I've done in all the years that I've been in the hobby, and I think I'm even luckier to still actually enjoy it as a hobby. So there's really nothing in particular right now that's like an outstanding check mark that I want to do in the list. So kind of just keep doing what I'm doing, and trying to help out all my sponsors, and just go to events and be able to have a good time. So I think that's really the biggest part. But I've been very, very lucky with what I've been able to do over the last couple of years.
Any big events coming up?
Big events, not that I can think of right now. I mean, Joall was kind of the biggest one leading up right now, but as far as I know, there's nothing huge. But still want to hit up the smaller events, and get to see everybody and just have a nice weekend out. So we'll see what comes up after this. But as far as I know, there's no big events. But hopefully, the Tucson Shootout next year or something like that is probably the next closest thing.
Cool. Yeah. Sometimes it's also fun to do like some of those smaller, more relaxed events.
Oh yeah, no, I still love doing all that, and obviously, as you know, the RC community is just great as a whole. So it's always a ton of fun being able to just go out for a couple of days and not have to worry about anything else, and just fly for fun and get to see everybody and just hang out.
Cool. Well, I'm gonna let you go. Thank you so much for taking the time, Santi. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it too.
We'll be happy to hear all that stuff you have to say.
Cool. Thank you, man.
All right. Take care.
All right. Have a good one. Bye.